Picture this. The year is 1995. You are a high school teacher living in a quiet suburb of Toronto or perhaps Vancouver. You drive a reliable, if unexciting, Honda Civic. You have a modest pension secured. You decide it is time to buy a house. It is a good house. Solid red brick, 3 bedrooms, a sprawling backyard with a mature maple tree shedding leaves in the autumn wind. It costs you $180,000. At the time, it feels expensive. You sit at your kitchen table, budgeting carefully. You realize you have to skip the fancy vacations to Europe, but the math works. Your salary covers the mortgage, the groceries, and the gas, with enough left over to put money away for a rainy day. You are living the promise. You are living in the boring, stable, prosperous fortress of the North, Canada. Now snap your fingers. It is 2026. You are standing in front of that exact same house. The bricks are weathered. The maple tree casts a longer shadow. But now there is a for sale sign on the lawn, and the asking price is $2.2 million. Inside that house, the concept of a single family has vanished. The basement has been converted into a separate, windowless unit, rented out to 3 international students sleeping on mattresses on the floor. The main floor is occupied by a young couple. Both are professionals, both make 6 figures, and both are drowning in so much debt that they are terrified to have children. These are the same people as that teacher in 1995. They did everything right. They followed the rules. They got the degrees. But the game changed. We are looking at a crime scene, but there is no blood on the pavement, and there is no yellow police tape fluttering in the wind. There is just a polite, smiling country that has quietly decided to eat its own young. If you are under the age of 40 in Canada, you are not crazy. You are not lazy. You are the victim of a 40-year economic experiment that has gone catastrophically wrong. You are living in a country that has stopped investing in the future and started cannibalizing the present. Today, we are going to peel back the polite veneer of Canadian society. We are going to look at the cold math that the news anchors gloss over. We are going to expose the hidden mechanism that turned a G7 industrial power into a massive real estate hedge fund with a flag. This is the story of how the Canadian dream became a lucid nightmare. To understand why you feel poor in a rich country, you have to understand that the word rich has fundamentally changed its meaning. In the 20th century, a rich country was a factory. It was a place that made things. It was a country where productivity went up, so wages went up. In the 21st century, Canada decided to stop being a factory and start being a casino. The data is screaming this at us. If you look at the OECD projections for the next 30 years, the years that define your career and your retirement, Canada is projected to be the worst performing advanced economy on the planet. Dead last. Why? Because we caught a disease. It is a specific economic sickness called the productivity trap. For the last 20 years, while the Americans were building tech giants and the Asians were building advanced manufacturing, Canadian business decided to stop innovating. Ask yourself, why invest $10 million in a new factory, or a new software startup, or a new R&D lab ventures that are risky and hard when you can just buy a plot of land, sit on it for 5 years, and make a tax-free fortune? This is the asset economy. We built a system where it pays more to own things than to do things. Think about the psychological toll of this reality. If you work a job, you pay income tax, you pay payroll tax, you pay sales tax. You contribute to the fabric of society. But if you bought a house in Kitsilano or the beaches in 2005, you earned more money last year by sleeping in your bed than a heart surgeon earned saving lives. That house earned tax-free capital gains. The surgeon paid a 53% marginal tax rate. The message the system sends is crystal clear. Labor is for suckers. Asset ownership is for kings. And this brings us to the villain of our story. In Canada, the villain isn't a single mustache-twirling individual. It is a structure. It is the oligopoly. If you walk into a grocery store in the United States, you have 50 choices. In Canada, you have 3. If you want a cell phone plan in Europe, you pay €20 for unlimited data. In Canada, you pay $80 for a data cap that feels like it's from 2012. Canada is essentially 3 mining companies, 5 banks, and 3 grocery chains in a trench coat. These monopolies are protected by the government. They are shielded from foreign competition. This is why you pay some of the highest fees in the world for banking, for internet, for air travel. This is the hidden tax of living in the North. Every time you tap your card, a few percentage points are siphoned off to a protected class of shareholders who face zero competition. So you have stagnant wages because of low productivity, and you have sky-high costs because of the oligopolies. That is a squeeze, but it's not the death blow. The death blow is the housing trap. We need to talk about the decision Canada made around 2008. When the rest of the world saw their housing bubbles burst, Canada's didn't. We patted ourselves on the back. We said, "Look how stable our banks are." But we didn't fix the problem. We doubled down. We lowered interest rates to near zero, and we kept them there. We invited the world's capital to park itself in Canadian condos. We turned housing from shelter, a basic human right, into a speculative financial asset traded like Bitcoin. The result is a feudal system. I use that word carefully. Feudalism, a system where your status is determined entirely by your relationship to land. If you are young in Canada today, your financial destiny is not determined by how hard you work, or how smart you are, or what degree you hold. It is determined by one thing: the bank of mom and dad. If your parents own a home, they can leverage it. They can gift you a down payment. You can enter the castle. You become a member of the landed gentry. If your parents rent, you are a serf. You will spend 50, 60, maybe 70% of your after-tax income paying off the mortgage of someone else. You are paying for their retirement with your poverty. This is the intergenerational war that nobody in Ottawa wants to admit is happening. The baby boomers, and I'm not blaming them individually, they just played the game as it was written, are sitting on trillions of dollars of real estate wealth. They vote. They vote to restrict supply. They vote to keep their neighborhoods quaint and low density. They fight every new apartment building at the city council meetings. They are pulling up the ladder. And the young look up at that ladder, and they realize it is gone. This leads to a phenomenon called delayed adulthood. It is a polite term for a tragedy. In the 1970s, the average age of a first-time homebuyer was 25. Today, in the major cities, it is pushing 37 or 38. That is a decade and a half of lost time. Think about what happens in those lost years. You don't have kids because you don't have a bedroom for them. Canada's fertility rate has collapsed to 1.33, an all-time low. We are literally dying out because we made it too expensive to reproduce. You don't start a business because you can't take the risk. If you miss a rent payment, you're homeless. So, you take the safe, boring corporate job. You stifle your own potential. You don't move for a better opportunity because you are terrified of losing your rent-controlled apartment. You are trapped in place. This is how a dynamic young country turns into a stagnant old museum. And then we have to talk about the accelerant, the policy that took a fire and turned it into an inferno, the population trap. For years, the Canadian consensus was that immigration is an unalloyed good, and culturally it is. Canada is a welcoming place, but economics is about supply and demand. It is cold, unfeeling math. In the last few years, the Canadian government decided to spike the population growth rate to levels seen in sub-Saharan Africa. We brought in over 1 million people in a single year, but we didn't build 1 million homes. We didn't build 1 million hospital beds. We didn't build 1 million seats on the JO train. We brought in hundreds of thousands of temporary residents and international students. Many of these students were sold a lie. Recruiters in India and Nigeria told them, "Come to Canada. It's the land of opportunity." They arrived and they found themselves sleeping 4 to a room in Brampton or Surrey, delivering Uber Eats in the snow, paying exorbitant tuition to strip mall colleges that exist solely to print diplomas for permanent residency applications. This isn't immigration. It is a labor supply shock. By flooding the market with low-skilled labor, we gave the oligopolies a gift. Why invest in automation? Why invest in productivity? Why raise wages? You can just hire a desperate student for minimum wage. This suppressed wages for the working class and the youth while simultaneously skyrocketing the demand for rent. It was a wealth transfer from the poor who rent and work for wages to the rich who own assets and hire labor. It is a policy that looks progressive on a pamphlet, but operates like 19th century robber baron capitalism in practice. So where does this leave you? The 28-year-old in the basement apartment. It leaves you in a state of cognitive dissonance. You walk past the luxury condos in Vancouver, empty, owned by shell companies. You see the grocery prices climbing every week. You hear the politicians talking about GDP growth, But GDP growth means nothing if the population is growing faster than the economy. That is called capital dilution. The pie is getting slightly bigger, but there are a million more people at the table holding forks. Your slice is getting smaller. Per capita GDP in Canada is falling. We're getting poorer, and the debt. The debt is the invisible chain around your neck. Canadians are some of the most indebted people on earth. We bought into the lie that debt is wealth. We use our houses as ATMs. We leased cars we couldn't afford. Now interest rates have normalized. The era of free money is over, and the hangover is beginning. We are seeing the rise of the negative amortization mortgage. This is a terrifying concept. It means you're making your monthly payment, but the payment isn't even covering the interest. Your debt is growing every month, even as you pay. You are a debt slave, in the truest sense of the word. And the government, they are trapped too. They know the housing market is a bubble, but they can't let it pop. Real estate and construction make up such a huge percentage of the Canadian GDP that if housing crashes, the entire economy evaporates. The banks would be insolvent. The pension funds would collapse. So they have to keep it propped up. They introduce 30-year amortizations. They buy mortgage bonds. They do everything they can to keep the air in the balloon. This is the suicide pact. To save the economy, they have to sacrifice the young. To save the young, they have to crash the economy. They have chosen to sacrifice the young. This is why you feel poor. Because in a very real mathematical sense, the system is extracting wealth from your future to pay for the mistakes of the past. You are paying for the healthcare of a generation that didn't save enough. You are paying for the infrastructure that hasn't been updated in 40 years. You are paying the rent that sustains the lifestyle of the asset class. But here is the warning. Here is where the story pivots from tragic to dangerous. Look at the brain drain. If you are a talented engineer from Waterloo, or a doctor from McGill, or a welder from Alberta, why would you stay? You look south of the border, you see the United States. It has its problems, huge problems. But you could buy a house in Texas or North Carolina for a third of the price of a shack in Toronto. You can earn double the salary in tech or medicine. The best and brightest are voting with their feet. They are leaving. And who is left behind? The old, the indebted, and the people who can't afford to leave. This creates a death spiral. As the tax base leaves, the taxes on those who remain must go up, which drives more people to leave. Canada is risking becoming a boutique hotel for the global rich, staffed by a permanent underclass of temporary workers, with a hollowed-out middle class wondering what happened to the country they grew up in. It is a polite apocalypse. There are no tanks in the streets. There are just for lease signs on the storefronts, and moving trucks heading for the border, and a silent, creeping despair in the eyes of the young. But this isn't just a Canadian story. This is the story of the entire Western world, just accelerated. Canada is the laboratory. We are the test case for what happens when you prioritize financialization over production. We are showing the world that you cannot build a nation on selling latte art and condos to each other. Eventually, you run out of money. So is there a way out? There is. But it is painful. It requires breaking the oligopolies. It requires a massive rezoning of our cities to flood the market with supply, crashing the price of housing. It requires a tax code that rewards work and punishes speculation. It requires the political courage to tell the older generation, your house is not a retirement fund. It is a house, and its value needs to come down so your grandchildren can live. Until that happens, the young will continue to feel poor because they are poor. They are asset poor, in a world where assets are everything. If you are watching this and you feel that tightness in your chest when you pay your rent, or that hopelessness when you look at real estate listings, acknowledge it. It is not in your head. It is in the ledger. You are living through the great deleveling. The rich country narrative is a ghost story. It's a memory of a time before the factories closed and the towers went up. The question is no longer, when will I be able to buy a home? The question is, what am I going to do about it? Do you accept the serfdom? Do you fight for policy change? Or do you join the caravan heading for the exit? The Canadian dream isn't dead, but it has emigrated, and it is waiting for you to decide if you are going to follow it, or try to resurrect it from the ashes of a credit bubble. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, Canada is rhyming with a cautionary tale.